So I remember so vividly when my late sister's son passed away, my mother was almost inconsolably devastated by that loss. And that is very natural because I think that when a parent loses a child, that is one of the most tragic and traumatic things that a parent could ever go through, is to lose their child, because you always believe that you're going to go before the child. And my mother to this day is grieving over that loss. And the only reason why she was able to move forward with some semblance in her life is because she had so many other children. And my mother confessed to me that if it weren't for her other children, she would surely have passed with my late sister's son, that she would not want to be in this life, and that it was because of the rest of her children that she was able to move forward with her life. But I know that she grieves over my sister every day. And to this day, I think about my late sister's son every day. There is not a day that goes by where I do not try to connect with her spirit, her consciousness. I do not try to download the messages that she's trying to give me. I do not think about her. To this day, every day, I think about my late sister's son, and I surely miss her for sure. And what really consoles me about her death is that I know she's with me in spirit. She's probably with me now more than ever before, because her spiritual energy consciousness is so present right here, right now with me and with all of my family members. I know she's always looking out for us, watching us, protecting us, supporting us, guiding us, and giving us unconditional love. And knowing that spiritual love and presence of my late sister's son has given me a lot of peace and serenity, even, after her death. But there is some aspect of the grieving process, especially when I'm depressed. I feel more grief towards her death and her not being here. And I can feel the missing of her when I feel some stress or anxiety or depression. And so as I've been doing my blogging over the years, I've noticed a lot of comments about people's griefs. And also in our Facebook community, a lot of members I'm seeing have grief over so many different issues. One of our members has still been grieving about the loss of her mother from 7 months ago. Another member is grieving about the loss of her sister. And so for this week's video, part 1 about grieving, I want to address the 2 patterns that I'm seeing over this grieving process. And in next week's video, I want to give you practical tips about how to manage your grief, along with a meditation to help you manage and alleviate your grief. So look out for those 2 videos next week. And so I want to know from you, are you currently experiencing grief in your life? And if so, what is it? A death of a family member, a death of a friend, a recent divorce, or something else? And how well are you coping with the grief? Leave your answers and comments below. So a few months ago, I did a one-on-one private session with a viewer who really was seeking my help. And she was telling me a story about her divorce. She had been with a man for many years. It was like 25 or 30 years, something like that, for a very long time. He left once, and then he came back, and then he left again. She's told me that her first reaction was, okay, that's fine, I'm okay. I can deal with this. I can handle it. I can move forward. I have a business to run. I have all these children to take care of. I mean, she had a lot of kids that she was really taking care of, including like her niece. So it wasn't just her children. And she felt that she had no time to really grieve, that she had to just move on with her life, and that she could handle this divorce or separation whatever it was, she felt that I can handle it because I have a lot of things on my plate. I can't afford to grieve. And what I realized was that the whole time she was speaking, I felt this pent up kind of this anxious energy about her. You know, she was speaking kind of faster. Her thoughts were a little chaotic. They weren't orderly. So I got this anxious feeling from her. And towards the end of the session, I awoke and I became enlightened to why she was going through so much suffering and pain and all this anxiousness. And I realized that she did not honor the grieving process, that she did not allow herself to grieve before she could move forward with her life, that she skipped the grieving process trying to justify in her mind that she was okay, that she was fine with the divorce. I mean, you're talking about being with somebody for 25, 30 years. How can you just skip that grieving process, right? And that's what she essentially did. She just skipped the grieving process. I said, you never gave the time to honor yourself to properly grieve over this loss. Because, you know, divorce is a loss. Divorce is a loss. You know, it's when somebody is not in your life, that has been in your life for many years, that's a loss. It's like, you know, you've lost a limb. And so she never gave herself the time to honor that grieving process. And that was one of the things that I've noticed about her. And when I said that, all of a sudden it made sense to her. It was like a lightning bolt had just lit. And her energy just started to calm down at that moment. It was like a little shift. It was literally a shift where she was awakened to why she was feeling so anxious, so chaotic. It's because she never gave herself the time and honored the time to grieve. And that's really, really important, is to be okay with the grieving, is to allow the grieving to happen, to honor yourself, to acknowledge that grief, to be present with it. So that is one of the things that I'm seeing, is that some people are not honoring the grieving process, and we need to do that in order to move forward with our life. So the second pattern that I'm seeing in the grieving process is that some people are grieving too long, where now they cannot move forward with their life. The grieving just paralyzes them, it debilitates them, and they cannot move forward with their life. As in one of our members who's been grieving for her mother for 7 months, and she said that she can't seem to move forward with her life because of the loss of her mother. Now, 7 months is not that long, but it's long enough where you should be able to move forward with your life, right? So it's not to say that you're not going to remember the loss or you're not going to miss that person. But if grief starts to paralyze you and debilitate you, then that grieving no longer serves you. So in the first case, she skipped over the grieving process. In the second case here, she's grieving for too long, where now she can no longer move forward with her life. And that becomes very, very debilitating and paralyzing. And so when we have a loss of a loved one, like a parent or a child, the grief can be so deep and profound, which is why it paralyzes us and we can't move forward. But this is the time when we have that tremendous grief, is an opportunity that God is giving us to really awaken us to our soul and to the infinite love of God and the universe. This is an opportunity to turn the tragedy into an awakening moment. And so I always say that my late sister's son's death, which was the most tragic thing in my life, was my gift to my spiritual awakening, which is the reason why I am doing the work of yin and yang living. Because if it wasn't for my late sister's son's death, I would never have started to nurture my spiritual path. So our greatest tragedy is really our greatest teacher. Our greatest tragedy is really our greatest opportunity to learn and grow for the expansion of our soul, to become closer to God, and to see the perspective of the unconditional love and compassion that God has for us. And so one of my spiritual teachers, Ram Dass, wrote this beautiful book called Polishing the Mirror. And in the book, he mentions about a couple, Steve and Anita, who lost their daughter by rape and murder. And so not only was the loss devastating, but the manner in which she died was just horrific. I mean, rape and murder. And so Ram Dass found out that Steve and Anita, the parents, were followers of Ram Dass's teaching. So he wrote them a letter. And this letter is so profound. I tell you, every time I read this letter that he wrote to Steve and Anita, I cry. I cannot not cry. It is so deep and profound, and it talks so beautifully about the process of grieving. So he writes, "Dear Steve and Anita, Rachel finished her work on earth and left the stage in a manner that leaves those of us left behind with a cry of agony in our hearts as the fragile thread of our faith is dealt with so violently. Is anyone strong enough to stay conscious through such teachings as you are receiving? Very few, and even they would have only the briefest whisper of equanimity and peace amidst the screaming trumpets of their rage, grief, horror, and desolation. I can't assuage your pain with my words, nor should I, for your pain is part of Rachel's legacy to you, nor that she or I would inflict such pain by choice, but there it is, and it must burn its purifying way to completion. For something in you dies when you bear the unbearable, and it is only in that dark night of the soul that you are prepared to see as God sees and to love as God loves. Rachel came through you to do her work on earth, which included the manner of death. Now her soul is free, and the love that you can share with her is invulnerable to the winds of changing time." Now, I left out a couple of paragraphs from Ram Dass's letter, but the words that really had a strong impact on me was, "For something in you dies when you bear the unbearable, and it is only in that dark night of the soul that you are prepared to see as God sees and to love as God loves." Wow. Wow. Those words are so profound that it is only in the dark of our soul that we can see God as God sees everyone and everything. So, our grief, which is our greatest tragedy, when we have this profound grief, it is an opportunity to go into that dark soul and start transmuting that dark energy into the light of God, and be able to start to connect with the infinite unconditional love of God and the bigger picture that God has for everyone and the universe, and allowing us to just be present with that grief. Ram Dass says you have to grieve and you have to allow it to happen. You can't just skip over it. And of course, you're going to have these most deep grieving moments of your life that hopefully will allow you to connect with your soul and connect with God's divine love, compassion that He really has for everyone. And so I say that our grief is truly, truly our greatest tragedy, but our greatest tragedy is really an opportunity for our greatest gift to awakening to the truth of who we really are, which are these spiritual beings that are eternal. And we come into this physical form and experience these tragedies and experience that grief in order to become closer, to connect with our divine soul and the unconditional love of God and the universe. And so grief can truly, truly be our greatest teacher. So grief is a great opportunity to see things, no matter how horrific that situation is, from our soul's perspective. That's what grief truly allows us to do. And it's really one of our greatest teachers, is to give us the opportunity to see from our higher self, the soul's perspective, become closer to God, and start having more of the perspective from the way God sees everything. And when we start seeing the way God sees everything, we start to have compassion and more understanding of what's going on in our lives and the people around us and all of the loss and the grief. And I think this is one of the best ways to truly, truly deal with that really deep grief when we have it. You know, the loss of a parent, the loss of a child, the loss of a sibling. These are deep and profound grief. And so please remind yourself to have faith that there is a bigger picture at hand going on, and to be able to see that bigger picture, or to be able to even connect to that bigger picture, is by having faith that there is that loving hand of God always with us, around us. I know it's very hard to see it when you're going through grief, but if you can just allow that grief to take its course, you will start to connect from more of your soul's perspective and start to see the situation in a more understanding and compassionate light, the way God sees it. So I always say that grief is truly our greatest teacher. And so, as I said before, in my next week's video, I'm going to show you practical tips on how to manage the grieving, as well as provide a meditation to help you deal and handle with your grieving. Because, you know, I know that this is such a hard thing to go through alone, which is why I'm providing that meditation. So look out for those videos next week. And please share any of your grieving experiences in comments below, because your stories really help me and my community at large. And if you like this video, please make sure to share it and subscribe to my channel. And I want to encourage you to join our Facebook community for deeper healing, mind, body, and soul. And in that community is where we do group healing meditations, as well as we do other types of live sessions where we discuss topics as loneliness, grieving, or toxic relationships. And we also offer one-on-one private sessions on that Facebook community. So if you want a deeper healing of your mind, body, and soul, ask to join our Facebook community, which is facebook.com/groups/yin and yang living. facebook.com/groups/yin and yang living. And if you want to visit all of my spiritual and holistic living tips, just go to my website at yinandyangliving.com. Thank you. Om Shanti.